it's one of the most proud moments in my career because it's not about doing it when it's easy. It's about doing it when it's fucking hard.
Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Belgian Jasper. If this is your first time in the channel, hit subscribe right now. Bobby, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. As we were joking before the recording, this is the first time I get to talk to you, so I'm definitely super excited. You always come across as a pretty down-to-earth guy and relaxed when you talk to people, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. But this is yet another Overkill release. I mean, you could almost put your watch to it, and I know it's been 5 years. For other bands, that would be a normal time between albums. For you guys, that's like a long time to wait. Yet another rodeo. Does this still excite you, or is it kind of like same old? You've seen everything by now. What's going through your mind in this release cycle?
Well, I mean, it's, I think that, to some degree, the selfish end of this is that we're opportunists. And if you can take an opportunity and squeeze the shit out of it, you get better results than you had done last time, or at least believe that you have the opportunity to get better results with the opportunity. That's where excitement comes from, and I always say, I've had this question on, the 15th record, on the 17th record, but I say, the results really kind of speak for themselves. I mean, if you can raise the bar or expand the parameters of what have done prior, then the excitement remains. If it just becomes another dog and pony show, same old, then, why even do it at that point?
Yeah.
I mean, there's other things that I would like more so than just being part of the novelty section in the vinyl shop.
Cut your dreams away, I long to hold you near. I am the surgeon. The mantra in the band when you went into this recording cycle was, let's record this as if this is the last, or let's write this as if this is the last record we'll ever do. So when you does that vibe come naturally? You say like, well, if your heart's not into it, then why do it altogether? But you also kind of made that statement, it seemed, up front. Like, so does that feeling come natural, or do you kind of have to, hey guys, okay, let's give it all we got? Do you have to pep yourself up a little bit, like a coach in a locker room?
I mean, it's a good question, and I mean, even write it like it's the last record. I mean, I was just fooling around with that, but I think that it actually, somewhere in there, once something is spoken, it kind of takes precedent, even in your subconscious. Where you can.
There's an accountability now.
You're always going back to it. I've had records where I've had like key phrases in my head. The entire time, like take no shit, for instance. And it could be something like that, or push back. And my head continuously goes to that thing. So I think that it actually has credence. If it's even said jokingly or said in casual conversation, it has credence. So I don't think that, I never think in terms that, we're going into to write the last record. But I mean, it has to be exciting to do. There has to be something that makes it different than the last one, even if we're using the same formula. So I'm always happy to kind of, not overthink it, but think it to the point where I'll say, this is my motivation for this record. And that, again, that, what are the results? That's really what the telltale sign is of whether it was successful for us or not. And of course we're selfish bastards. I mean, you don't do 20 fucking records not making a fucking fortune at it.
Right.
Unless you're doing it, so there's that to it. So if I can aspire to be that better singer, put more of myself out there at fucking 63. I mean, that is some way to fucking, finish your life up. I got more fucking time behind me than in front of me, so I might as well enjoy it, I am the surgeon. I am the face of fear. I cut away your dreams. You never really know what to expect as an Overkill fan, because within songs, you'll take us on, different twists and turns. This album, there's a real interesting, to use a big word, idiosyncrasy to this album, even more than before, where it is
several songs, not every song maybe, but I'd say the whole album seems to be more than ever inspired by classic rock and classic 80s metal. But at the same time, this is arguably one of your heaviest albums at the same time, which is like a weird balance. Do you agree with that sentiment? Do you see more of those classic influences in this record?
Well, you know what? I mean, I always have. But what I didn't see was something you just said, was that, and arguably it is also one of the heaviest records, and I never thought that, but I suppose to some degree it is because of the extremes that are in it, whether it be the extreme, something that is almost progressively layered in thrash like Twist of the Wick, or something that's Wicked Place, that follow each other. It's almost becomes like a swinging pendulum,
right?
Where it goes to this height of the heavy to this height of the swing and the groove of that rock and roll of the 1970s, or classic rock like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So it was never thought of while doing it. I think it was just, again, back to that first answer, more so pushing the parameters of what was there prior. And we've always had that groove. I mean, we did on the last record, we did a song called Head of the Pin, which is it just has that kind of swinging thing, and all the way back to Skull Crusher, it's got a swing in it. But I think the pushing of it is what makes it that much more interesting. But you don't ever see you never see the forest because of all the trees until you're outside. I mean, so it's, so I'm, what are we doing here? All I know is what we were doing when it was happening was something I was digging, because I was saying, wow, this is a whole bunch of shit of where I come from, stuff I'm cut from personally, And Didi also, I mean, Didi's just one of those riff dudes,
Right.
And he's together how many countless riffs on this record, and they're kind of seamless riffs, which is really the key, I think, to making, a good Overkill record. Sure, we got to drop off the mountain sometime and take you on that journey that you had just mentioned, in like a center section, get a little bluesy or get a little rock and roll, but it still has to have that seamless entity to it. So, heaviest record, and also probably the most diverse or eclectic vibe.
Yeah. So this takes into something that I wanted to ask you about, because, I mean, I was born in the early 80s, so I was technically speaking around when Overkill kind of broke through and the first classic albums. I only discovered Overkill as a teenager in the mid-90s, let's say. And throughout, as far as, at least for me, I wasn't obviously there to really experience it when you guys were, releasing the albums in the 80s and the early 90s. But if I look back at it now, Overkill always comes with this almost like an expectation of, like, blue collar, chill, put our feet on the ground, not, don't go too crazy. While there were other bands that were being labeled as, oh, they're not just thrash, they're proggy thrash, or they're technical thrash, or stuff like that. And looking back, I find it so weird, because I find very little about Overkill to be straightforward now and back in the day. You were always like a band that did things slightly different, whether it's the newer albums or also, songs like Elimination as well, or, Bastard Nation, in Union We Stand, like all that kind of stuff. It felt very different than what people now look at the blueprint or the stereotypical trash, if you will. But you guys never got that label, it seemed to me. I don't know if that happened at the time. Like, is that something that was weird to you? Because, there's so many bands that played thrash by the numbers, I'll call it. But you guys never did that. And somehow nobody seemed to give you credit for being more creative than your image. Does my question make sense?
It does. I mean, it's interesting because, sometimes you get from people, just in normal conversation, oh, I used to be to you guys in the 80s, or, I lost interest because it was, it remained the same. And it's the farthest thing from the truth. It means that you really never listened to it, because it's, the principle was put on your boots and go to work, which if you take that from the musical standpoint, it's just like, oh, it's the same old shit. They're fucking ditch diggers. You know what I'm saying? They ain't the worker. It's not the wow, look how interesting.
I'll have to subtitle that for the
but the interesting part about it for us from the inside is that we've always had all these influences.
Right.
I mean, I did a record a few years ago called BPMD. I was cut for this fucking record. Love it or hate it, but I was cut for it because it was a shit I was listening to when I was your age getting into Overkill. So it was that hard rock influence I've carried through Overkill in most of my vocal lines, and more so in the later years, more so through the 90s when we got a groove and a place to breathe between the guitar riffs where it wasn't just thrash. So I do think that the influences are, I'm not going to say boundless, but there's at least a half a dozen different places we come from. It is not just, here comes the trained puppy jumping through the ring of fire. It's just those all different places. And I think for the people that really, I mean, you don't have to, dissect every song. They're there to be enjoyed. But if each one makes you feel different, that is the success in a record. If you press play and it is the exact same beats at the beginning as it is in the end, it hardly changes in the center. I don't see why the 50 minutes is fucking worth it.
I first saw you play at Grass Pop in 2002. Playing a tent. I think you were a headliner of one of the tents. This is when Grass Pop was just a day and a half as a festival, not the mammoth thing it has become now. And it's a show that I'll never forget. One of my favorite shows of all time. It really brought me into to Overkill. And this was just before thrash was coming back, right? With like Thrash of the Titans in the States and all these bands came back.
I totally remember it.
Yeah. But you guys were like, because you're going to go on tour with Heath, a perfect example of that, a band that kind of, completely disappeared and then came back in this, renaissance of thrash that kind of kicked, I think, in full gear, like 2005 maybe. You guys never kind of threw the towel in the ring. Is it just that idea of like you need to put the work in and it doesn't really matter what the outcome is? What was the main driver for you to never say, you know what, we're done?
Well, the outcome is the motivation too, but you have to enjoy the work. I mean, if you're looking your whole life to get somewhere, you're gonna really miss the journey, and the journey itself is that's where all the happiness and satisfaction comes from. You collect these little moments like jewels from day to day, and you pile them up at the end. It's not really about they're waiting for you at the end. You carry them with you at the end. So, I always think that when the 90s came around and like you saw the show and, there were some darker days for metal. But
for sure,
my answer to this is in a whole bunch of the shit I said to you earlier, and that's that we're opportunists. We realized that a lot of these guys were going to go home and chain smoke, play guitar in their basement, work for their dad, and complain that nobody appreciated their fucking genius. Well, that gives us the opportunity. There's a hell of a lot less room, a hell of a lot more room for us to spread our wings. And smelling this coming, Didi and I were, we had some great managers, man. These guys ran a club in New York called Maor. I mean, it's like a mecca of metal. I mean, I saw Motorhead here. I saw Iron Maiden under Charlotte and the Harlots at this place. I still have a fucking $15,000 bar tab that isn't closed, and the fucking bar's been gone for 10 years. But we paid attention to what these guys were saying. So when we knew the dark days were coming, we could cut our expenses by 20% back then. That's what we were paying management. And we could put that cash back into our business to be able to do what we wanted to do, to continue on that journey, regardless of what the climate was. And I think that was, it's one of the most proud moments in my career, because it's not about doing it when it's easy. It's about doing it when it's fucking hard and being able to say, because that's like the fighter who's going into the ring and it's like, the odds are stacked against you. It's a 10-to-1 chance that you succeed. But for some reason, you score, you get the shit kicked out of you, but you score that one knockout to the chin, and that's where you say, this was all worth it. On
this, deep conversation, the question I have to ask you is, when are you gonna put on that squirrel suit and run that marathon, or play a show with it?
I've never gotten the answer for that squirrel suit Wikipedia thing, but I'm betting, and I would bet my last dollar that has to do with one of those fucking pricks in Exodus. I think it's Gary. I was just like, because he would always bust my balls about something. He could always sneak in there and do something like that. He called me on a radio show once and had me going, and I'm like, what is wrong with this person? He was asking me all these like crazy questions. And I was like, I looked at that Wikipedia page where I was in a squirrel suit running for testicle cancer, but I was drunk and fell into a drink stand. I'm like, this has got Exodus written all over it.
Some good, clean, violent fun, as they would say.
It was. I mean, and that's kind of the beauty of the fact that, that the scene has gotten healthy since we talk about that Grass Pop show.
Right.
I'm soon thereafter, maybe half a decade after that, it started becoming very healthy, and indoctrinated youth back into it. I mean, this is a fucking young man's game or a young woman's game as opposed to an old fucking gray hair. But I mean, experience obviously speaks for something, and right. So does Scorch, But the point is that it got healthy, and records that came out. I mean, some of the Exodus records or the Testament records or the Overkill records, Ironbound. I mean, even they were a reflection of a great scene. In my opinion, the scene was actually had a. It wasn't on life support anymore. It had a strong heartbeat. It was running the. It was running. The marathon. So that was a great time.
I mean, obviously, there's always nostalgia that is covering the classics, and when you go play a show, if you were to only play songs of the last 2-3 albums, it would be a really cool show. But a lot of people that come to see your show would be like, "Oh, I wish they played some of the old stuff as well." That's just the reality of the game. But all the bands that you just mentioned, including yourself, arguably released their best albums in their career in the last 10 years. You say like a healthier scene. I know you guys had to deal with a ton of bad people around you, and labels, managers, agents that didn't get it, especially as hard music was changing in the early 90s. Today we see millions of record labels and a lot even bigger labels really run by people that love metal, but that also sometimes comes with a bit of a DIY or amateur perspective. Is it for you, because you've seen it evolve over 4 decades, is that part of the industry also in a healthier place today?
I don't necessarily think so. I think that you have to obviously adapt to it. I think it proves that a lot of the older bands, and I think ourselves included, dinosaur or not, you have to be able to adapt to whatever the situation is and be able to reinvent yourself. I mean, you can see some bands out there, even in the press, they come in and they complain that it's not like the old days. Well, they're not coming back.
Right.
You can complain all you want, but it's falling on deaf ears. And the first time you complain, everybody goes, "Oh," and the second time you complain, everybody goes, "What a fucking zombie!" A fucking complaint. The whole time. But I'm really happy that I was able to experience the end of record company excess, because when we got moved over to Atlantic Records, the promotion budget was insane. And I have to clear this up. I mean, sure, there's bad people in the industry, but there's bad people in every fucking industry, and we've never really dealt with bad people. We might have dealt with people who don't understand us, but nobody's ever sat us down and said, "You should do this," or they sat us down and said, "What do you want to do?" They said, "Listen, we're going to have to, if we have to get on regular radio, we have to, change that profanity in there. It can't be a fuck you in there. There's got to be, we got to change it to something else." And that was understandable. You don't want to sacrifice what you created, but the other side of it is you do want that radio play to get more exposure. So I can never say that I've been in a situation where somebody was ever putting the screws to me totally. And I think that's because of that prior answer of understanding management and looking for those good relationships. Man, I fucking took a demo all the way to North Carolina. you know, because I knew that Atlantic was on the way out with us, and another label was on the way in, and I wanted to be on that label, and it was CMC Records, you know. And the guy was like, all the way to North Carolina with the demo. It's like an 11-hour ride, you know. I'm like, yeah, it was nice. I went down the coast. I should have took my bike, you know, that kind of a thing. But I think that has something to say, that those people wanted to work with these people because those people were good people who recognized the passion that we had as good people. So I think there's a lot of really positive stories in there too.
You've got this cool tour coming up. You're going to play a lot. I'm sure you're going to be very busy. For all the fans that are looking forward to those live shows, what can they expect?
Well, sure, there's going to be new stuff. I mean, I think that's the confirmation that you're still in the game in the current day. You know, you still have validity. And we obviously believe in the record. I mean, you know, we've only alluded to the results of it in this interview, but fuck, man, it's got a great fucking feel to it for me. It doesn't feel like, you know, the same old dog and pony show, you know. Yeah. And so what keeps us, you know, what keeps the, you know, the Stiva Lull is to fucking get out there and be able to play the new shit. I mean, that's really way more important than going back and playing Elimination. I mean, I get it gets people excited, and you know, then you go into a Union We Stand, but man, I want to do Twist of the Wicked Place, and I want to I want to get in there. I mean, this is what it's all about for me. I mean, there is no fucking, it doesn't change the back end. You know what I'm saying? It's not changing the payday if I leave the fucking surgeon out. So it's going in.
Right. Awesome. Awesome.
They can expect, or you can expect, I would say 3 to 4 or 5 songs off the new record.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's amazing. We'll all look forward to that. Maybe the final question, the question that never seems to get answered properly. Although I think you've mentioned before that, yes, there is a space between Over and Kill, even though nobody writes it properly. So to set the record straight once and for all, the correct way to write the band's name is in 2 words, or is it in 1 word?
As the horns, Overkill.
There we go. Fantastic. Mr. Bobby Blitz, thank you so much for your time today. I had a lot of fun asking you some questions. And I really hope I can get to see you guys play again, because it would be my 21st anniversary of seeing you live for the first time, which would be cool. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best with the continued release cycle.
Talk soon, Jasper.
Talk soon.
See you on the road, bro.
You are awesome for watching this video. Click right here to see more content like it, and subscribe to the channel.